Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the proprietor of the Benjamin Dixon Show, Ben Dixon himself. Ben, welcome back to the program.
Sam, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
So let's start with the what's going on in terms of impeachment and whistleblower complaint. This whistleblower complaint. I mean, they are unrelated at this moment in some respects, but I think they're related in terms of this battle that seems to be going on within the Democratic caucus, where we now have, I think, 136 Democrats who are on record in support of impeachment. That would leave, I don't know, about 80 some odd, or maybe about 100 plus who are not out publicly for impeachment at this point. Nancy Pelosi, there was a story in Politico 2 or 3 days ago that apparently about a week ago she was in chastising the staff members of the Judiciary Committee in front of the entire caucus and said, I don't care if this leaks out. Now, I mean, she clearly has been stifling this thing. We had some pretty interesting testimony, I thought, from Corey Lewandowski this week, particularly after he was, and almost specifically when he was questioned by the staff attorney, Barry Burke, I think is his name. And so, I mean, just put all this in context and we can get a little bit deeper into this whistleblower story, which seems to be drip dropping out. In fact, let's do this. Let's play this clip of Adam Schiff. Apparently, the story goes that a whistleblower went to the DNI, said, I've got a problem here with something, then went to the Inspector General of the Directorate of National Intelligence, and the IG said this is a urgent, compelling issue that we find at least credible, and this whistleblower complaint by statute needs to be given to the relevant committees in Congress, and the DNI denied, basically suppressed this whistleblower complaint, supposedly on the orders of the Justice Department, which I don't know why they get to do this either. I mean, I don't know why anybody does. And the IG went to the House Intelligence Committee, testified behind closed doors as to what the nature of the complaint is. So Adam Schiff, presumably in this clip, this was from yesterday at about 1 o'clock, knows what the complaint was. And here it is.
Mr. Atkinson wrote, I set forth the reasons for my concluding that the subject matter involved in the complainant's disclosure not only falls within the DNI's jurisdiction, but relates to one of the most significant and important of the DNI's responsibilities to the American people. This is what's being withheld from Congress right now. We do know that the Department of Justice has been involved in the decision to withhold that information from Congress. We do not know, because we cannot get an answer to the question about whether the White House is also involved in preventing this information from coming to Congress. We do not have the complaint. We do not know whether the press reports are accurate or inaccurate about the contents of that complaint. But what I do know is this: if in a matter within the jurisdiction of the Director of National Intelligence, you have an employee of that community or a contractor or detailee who follows the law and makes a complaint, and it is possible for the subject of that complaint to essentially quash the complaint or keep it from Congress, then this system is badly broken.
Okay, and let me just clarify one thing here. So apparently this guy Atkinson, who is the IG, he was not authorized to tell the committee anything of substance about the complaint. Only he was testifying as to his analysis that, in fact, from a statutory perspective, it was a legitimate complaint and needed to be communicated to Congress, which, of course, the DNI lawyer disagrees with. I mean, so this is another process thing that's being bogged down. But this is why and we saw part of that this week with the Barry Burke, I think it is, or testimony, or I should say questioning of Corey Lewandowski. And that is, when you move into an impeachment mode, there are all sorts of rules changes to the process that can expedite things and shake things loose. And yet, Nancy Pelosi wants none of it.
That's the refrain. That's the chorus. That's the hook of the song for the season, right? Nancy Pelosi, for whatever reason, doesn't want to impeach anyone. We saw it with Brett Kavanaugh. More evidence has come out against him. We're seeing it. And here's the disturbing part about this. It's not just that we have a president who is not only criminal in his own personal behavior, whether it reaches high crimes and misdemeanors, that's up for debate, and that's why we have the impeachment inquiry. But it's the fact that he has the ability to get different parts of this government to act in a manner that itself creates a constitutional crisis, right? The fact that we have the DOJ overstepping its bounds once again to suppress information that just so happens to be a threat to the president. And yet the one remedy that we have to actually address these issues, the Speaker of the House, the leader of the opposition party, if we can call it that at this point, chooses not to. And I'm still not clear as to why, because there's really no justification. If your fear is a political one, then you are literally putting politics before your job and before your oath.
I mean, let's putting that question aside for a moment, the politics one, because I think that, that's but I agree with you. It's stunning. And I've said this half a dozen times this week. I'll say it one more time. The framers of the Constitution, the people who wrote the Constitution, contemplated Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not it was contemplated. He is not the moment that America doesn't become America. What the framers did not contemplate was to have Nancy Pelosi do nothing.
Right.
I mean,
right.
In light of like an incredibly unpopular president who is, the House impeached Andrew Johnson back in the day during Reconstruction because he was vetoing everything. He was being very difficult. He was acting erratically outside of office, et cetera, et cetera. And the case to impeach Donald Trump seems to me to be so much less partisan, right?
Right.
This guy is literally doing the things, even, it's his corruption is so old school that they, all of the commentary contemplate, we don't want somebody who's going to use the office to enrich himself with foreign powers. Like that's, it feels like what this whistleblower was talking about was very similar to that, whether I don't know if you're getting cash or if it's just like, we're going to get maybe some services in kind for the campaign by promising you things like, you go and do an investigation on Joe Biden's kid.
Joe Biden, yeah.
And we'll make it worth your while with a certain investment and God knows what they've gotten from the Saudis. When we look back on this era, putting aside politics for a moment, when we look back on this era, and we say, where was the failure of our institutions? The failure is not going to be in the presidency. The failure is going to be in the House.
Right. That's the surprising thing about it, right? Nancy Pelosi is uniquely positioning herself in history to be a bigger problem than Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump is essentially daring America to impeach him. He's saying, I'm going to do everything that you could possibly imagine. It's almost as though he is uniquely designed to violate everything possible, the way he thinks. Like for him to offer a quote unquote bribe, it's not even a bribe to him. That's just how he does business. Right. But that's not how you run the presidency. That's not how you are the chief executive of this country. And yet he operates in that manner. And Nancy Pelosi just simply looks and says, we're going to leave it alone because for whatever reason. Now, in full transparency, I've put in a call. I'm supposed to have a conversation with someone who works on her team because I want to know, like, you and I, Sam, I think you and I might have been one of the few progressives to give her the benefit of the doubt when she was running for speaker. And because we know one thing about Nancy Pelosi, when she wants to get something done, she's going to get it done.
Yes.
And now we see that she does not want to get this done, and there's absolutely no movement on it. So I just need to know why. People want to know why I'm like full-throated against Nancy Pelosi. Well, they need to explain why she is not doing her job as Speaker of the House.
And so let's address this political question, right? Because in that same instance, when Johnson was impeached by the House, he was not impeached he was not convicted, I should say, by the Senate, and so he wasn't removed. And my understanding of the history is the reason why he was not was because the Senate felt that that from a political standpoint, they didn't want to do that. That it would have been, better to run against him than to have him impeached, in part because they didn't have a vice president at the time. And they ultimately decided on political grounds. But I don't understand the political calculation here. Okay, like I can understand the concept of she has a political reason, but the political calculation seems just befuddling to me. Now, maybe they feel like, look, we don't have the votes. We can't control the people in our caucus. But again, that cuts against what you and I both know about Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
And it also cuts against the data that came out of 2018. I mean, it's one thing to say that if you're in a purple district, right, that you maybe can't come out for, a government control of all the major industries or something. But it's another thing to say that you can't come out against Donald Trump. I mean, these so-called frontline districts, this is not where Donald Trump won by 12 percentage points in 2016. These are ones where it was, evenly balanced. And to the extent that in 2018, people won in those districts, it was because they distanced themselves from Donald Trump, because they attacked Donald Trump. The ones that lost in these districts were ones that hewed too closely to Donald Trump. I mean, this is what that Bykofer, the pollster who had predicted this, the win in like June or May of 2018, her model showed this and makes that quite clear. And Nancy Pelosi seems to be just ignoring all of it.
You know what? I don't want to believe in 10-dimensional chess, but something just dawned on me. And I'm going to throw this out here and you tell me what you think. Perhaps it's timing, right? I've never seen Nancy Pelosi be just completely feckless in anything that she's attempted to do as Speaker of the House. She's been pretty vicious and pretty cutthroat and got things done. Maybe she's simply trying to time this. This is the only thing I can give her, Sam. It's a stretch. She's trying to time this so that during the election, we are in the impeachment inquiry, and we have not yet reached the stage where the Senate can find him not guilty or not convict him, rather. And so he doesn't have a political victory to go into the elections. Instead, during the entirety of the elections, he's mired in the inquiry. That could be the only reason I could see valid for her to hold out this long.
I suppose. If she thinks it's going to be more effective at that time from a political standpoint, and that you could have the vote in October of 2016, 2020, and then put it on the Senate. But I don't know. I'd like to see the Senate have to deal with this for like 3 or 4 months, and at least, right? And we're in September now. Yeah. We're almost in. I mean, I don't know, when is the magic time. The only thing that strikes me is that she either believes that she can't get the votes from the Democratic caucus in the House, which I find hard to believe.
Right.
Or she doesn't trust Chuck Schumer to do his job, and that and she's not convinced, because that would also be very problematic. I mean, if the whole idea is that you want the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate, to quash this, but I don't know how bad you'd have to be at your job if you're Chuck Schumer to not be able to deliver these votes. Like, I could see maybe Joe Manchin maybe.
Certainly Joe Manchin.
Being the lone holdout, but that doesn't seem to me to expose too many House members. Although, I mean, that's, for the life of me, I'm befuddled by it. And the Lewandowski thing showed a little bit of a taste of what they could do with impeachment.
Again, like I said, that I can't think of any reason either. But if I had to just really try, the only thing that makes sense is she's trying to get the timing right on it for political purposes. But again, your question is the one that's most paramount. When is the magic time? Then when is the moment that she's going to strike? Because there is a lengthy period for the inquiry as well as the Senate hearing, the Senate trial.
I guess, we'll have a better notion going forward. I would think like this whistleblower thing might be able to give them the sort of like, the more impetus to push this stuff. But there is a quality of Nancy Pelosi being out of step, right? And just sort of like not understanding this political moment. The idea of being afraid of polarization is just absurd. You can't, there's times where you basically, polarize. It's, and I'm talking, I want to pivot to Joe Biden here, who I think is also not of the moment, but a lot of this is just sort of like, look, you don't want to engage in the fight, but it's a dumb thing to say when someone is pounding on your face with their fist. Like honestly, it's like, yeah, look, I don't believe in fighting. And so I'm not going to add to this as the person is pounding you into pounding your face. And that is the situation that we're going to have going into 2020. You're going to have a polarized electorate and you're not going to be able to, it's not a question of convincing people who have already chosen sides. It's a question of mobilizing anybody who might be in any way sympathetic to your cause. And one, as we talk about this election, there was a stat that came out today about college students. They doubled their rate of participation from 2014 to 2020. To 2018. That's stunning. This is an off-year election. And that is, I think, pretty stunning. I have a feeling 2016 was not a banner year for college students to vote. And I imagine they're going to come out, with a similar dynamic. And if that holds true, I guess we'll see maybe some of that in the primary season. But we have the polls.